It's all part of a deal she struck with the Crown in exchange for one thing: her testimony against Paul Bernardo.
Have you ever wondered what happens when the bars of a prison cell are opened for a serial killer? What thoughts cross their minds as they step back into the society they once haunted? From cases like that of Karla Homolka, involved in the of at least 3 women, including her own sister, to the Lainz Angels of Death, killer of 49 patients in an Austrian hospital. These are the harrowing stories of serial killers who, against all odds, found their way back to freedom. David McGreevy's story is one of the most chilling and tragic in the annals of British criminal history. He is popularly known as the Monster of Worcester. His crimes in 1973 sent shockwaves through the United Kingdom, leaving an indelible stain of horror and disbelief. In the heart of Worcester, a city known for its serene beauty and historical significance, McGreevy committed an atrocity that starkly contrasted with the peaceful backdrop. At the age of 21, he was responsible for the brutal unaliving of 3 young children, siblings aged 4, 2, and 9 months. The circumstances of these incidents were not just horrific in nature, but also deeply personal, as the children were the offspring of a family with whom McGreevy lodged. The details of the crime are harrowing. In a fit of inexplicable rage, McGreevy unalived the children and then displayed their bodies on a neighbor's fence, an act of macabre barbarity that shook the community to its core. When asked about his motive for such a heinous act, McGreevy chillingly remarked that he was driven to unalive because the children wouldn't stop crying. Following his arrest, McGreevy's trial was swift, reflecting the public outcry and demand for justice. He was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. However, his sentence turned out to be far longer. McGreevy spent 45 years behind bars, a duration that reflected the severity of his actions and the enduring public revulsion towards his crimes. McGreevy experienced isolation and danger during his time in prison. Due to the nature of his crimes, other inmates frequently targeted him, necessitating his placement in protected areas for the majority of his incarceration. This aspect of his imprisonment highlights the complex challenges faced by the prison system in handling inmates convicted of particularly notorious crimes. In December 2018, after nearly half a century in prison, McGreevy was released on parole. This decision was predicated on a report that concluded he had changed considerably over the years. The parole board's assessment sparked a debate over the nature of rehabilitation and the criteria used to evaluate whether an individual is fit to re-enter society, especially in cases involving violent crimes. McGreevy's release from prison was met with mixed reactions. For some, it was a testament to the possibility of change and redemption, even for those who have committed the most heinous acts. For others, particularly those directly affected by his crimes, his release was a painful reminder of a tragedy that could never be undone. Since his release, the details of McGreevy's life have remained largely unknown to the public. Information about whether he has started a family, his current whereabouts, or any subsequent involvement with the law is not available. This lack of information has left a void, filled only by speculation and the haunting memory of his past actions. Juha Valjakala, who later adopted the name Nikita Bergenström, is a name synonymous with one of the most disturbing episodes in Nordic criminal history. On February 27, 2023, at the age of 57, he passed away after a life filled with violence, escape, and mystery, bringing an end to a tale that had fascinated and horrified Sweden and Finland for decades. Valjakala's descent into infamy began on a fateful summer night in 1988 in the peaceful northern Swedish community of Amsele. When Valjakala was 23 years old, he and his 21-year-old girlfriend, Marita Rudalami, started down a criminal path that would forever change the course of many lives. The incident that sparked this tragic chain of events was seemingly minor, the theft of a bicycle at midnight. However, this act set in motion a horrific sequence of events that would lead to a brutal confrontation in a local cemetery. The owner of the stolen bicycle, Sten Nilsson, and his 15-year-old son confronted Valjakala in the cemetery, a meeting that ended tragically, with Valjakala fatally shooting both. The violence escalated when Valjakala lured Nilsson's wife into the woods and brutally ended her life. This triple homicide, characterized by its senselessness and brutality, left the community of Amseli and the entire region in shock. The aftermath of the death saw Valjakala and Rudalami flee to Denmark, where they were apprehended a week later. Their trial garnered extensive media coverage and public attention in both Sweden and Finland, unfolding like a dramatic and tragic play. The courtroom dynamics were tumultuous, with Valjakala and Rudalami engaging in a blame game, each pointing the finger at the other for the unfortunate events. Ultimately, Valjakala was diagnosed as a psychopath with aggressive tendencies and sentenced to life in prison, while Rudalami received a 2-year sentence. Valjakala's time in prison was marked not just by his incarceration, but also by a series of dramatic escapes that added to his notoriety. He became as infamous for these escapes as he was for causing several people to leave this world. The last of these escapes occurred in October 2022, showcasing his relentless ability to elude captivity, albeit temporarily, as he was recaptured the same day. Throughout his life, Valjakala remained an enigmatic figure, with details about his personal life largely remaining elusive. Public records do not reveal any significant information about whether he started a family or his circumstances following his final recapture. This lack of personal detail contributed to the aura of mystery that surrounded him. Valjakala's death in 2023 brought an end to a life that had been steeped in controversy and tragedy. His story is a complex tapestry of crime, punishment, and the human psyche's darker aspects. The Amseli incidents, Valjakala's subsequent imprisonment and escapes, and the lack of clarity about his personal life have left many questions unanswered. In the quiet corners of Canadian society during the early 1990s, a sinister plot unfolded, one that shook the nation to its core. Karla Homolka, alongside her husband Paul Bernardo, orchestrated a series of crimes so heinous they are etched into the collective memory of a country. Their victims, young and innocent, were subjected to unimaginable horrors. Among them, Homolka's own sister, Tammy. Tammy Homolka, merely 15 years old, became an unsuspecting pawn in a twisted game. During a Christmas gathering, under the guise of a sisterly bond, Karla drugged her with animal tranquilizers. The drug-induced state led to Tammy choking on her own vomit, marking a tragic and unsettling start to the couple's reign of terror. But this was just the beginning. The duo continued their spree, doing horrible things to at least 3 women, each act more depraved than the last. When the law finally caught up with Bernardo in 1993, Homolka quickly shifted her narrative. She portrayed herself as a victim, was coerced, and was threatened into participation. Her convincing act led to a plea deal, reducing her sentence to a mere 12 years. It wasn't until later, with the discovery of videotapes, that the full extent of her involvement was revealed. The tape showed Homolka as a willing participant, contradicting her claims of innocence. However, the plea deal stood, and the legal system could not retract its leniency. Upon her release in 2007, Homolka attempted to vanish from the public eye. She moved to Guadeloupe with Thierry Bordelais, her new husband, and their 3 children, adopting the name Liane Bordelais. This semblance of a normal life was a far cry from her dark past, yet the shadow of her actions loomed large. By 2014, Homolka had resurfaced in Quebec, Canada. Her presence, once detected, reignited public outrage and fear. The woman who had been part of such unspeakable acts was now living among them, seemingly unencumbered by her past. This tension escalated in 2016, when it was revealed that Homolka had settled in the Montreal area. The situation reached a boiling point in 2019 when Homolka was seen volunteering at an elementary school in Montreal. Parents and community members were aghast. The idea that someone with Homolka's history could be in proximity to children was unfathomable. Debates raged over her rights versus the safety and peace of mind of the community. Despite the passage of years, the nature of her crimes made her presence intolerable to many. Her attempt to reintegrate into society raises difficult questions about redemption and the capacity for change. It also highlights the enduring impact of her actions on the families of her victims and the broader community. As of today, Karla Homolka's whereabouts and actions continue to be scrutinized, her past crimes casting a long, inescapable shadow. Her attempt to live a normal life is constantly under the microscope. Nikolai Jumal, infamously dubbed Metal Fang for his metal dental prosthetics, is one serial killer from the Soviet Union that's hard to forget. His reign of terror, spanning the late 1970s and early 1980s in the Kazakh SSR, now Kazakhstan, embodies a saga of unaliving people, cannibalism, and mental illness that continues to horrify to this day. Jumal, who was born in Kazakhstan in 1952, had a turbulent life filled with academic difficulties and a string of unremarkable jobs following his time in the Soviet Army. His travels across the vast expanses of the Soviet Union proved to be pivotal, particularly following a failed romantic relationship that profoundly altered his perception of women. This failed affair, coupled with his battle against venereal diseases, planted the seeds of a deep-seated aversion towards women. This antipathy, further fueled by exposure to certain disturbing literature, gradually morphed into dark, violent fantasies. Between 1979 and 1980, Jumal twisted fantasies became a gruesome reality in the Almaty area. He preyed primarily on women, engaging in acts of really bad things and cannibalism that shocked the community and law enforcement alike. His crimes were not just acts of violence, they were rituals of a disturbed mind, reflecting a descent into a place beyond the realms of societal norms. In the face of such atrocities, Jumal was declared insane and confined to a mental hospital. However, in 1989, in a twist that seems ripped from the pages of a thriller novel, he managed to escape. For 2 years, he evaded capture, living a life shrouded in shadows, until his arrest in 1991 for an offense as mundane as sheep theft led to his recapture. Following his apprehension, Jumal was returned to psychiatric care in Kazakhstan. Within the confines of the hospital, he has been described as orderly and calm, a stark contrast to the man who once terrorized the streets of Almaty. He spends his days engaging in the repair of small equipment, a seemingly benign occupation that belies the horrors of his past. This behavior has baffled experts and lay people alike, raising questions about the nature of mental illness and criminality. Louis Van Schoor's life is a story etched in the tumultuous history of South Africa, a narrative that intertwines personal tragedy with broader societal issues. Van Schoor was born into an apartheid-torn country, and his transformation from a security guard to a very bad man encapsulates a time of intense conflict and change. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Van Schoor was employed as a security guard in Cape Town. During this time, his role drastically shifted from protector to perpetrator. Tasked with responding to silent alarms at business premises, he took the law into his own hands. Over 3 years, Van Schoor was involved in shootings that resulted in the deaths of 39 people, all black or mixed race. These bad events, initially overlooked by authorities, were later brought to light, leading to Van Schoor's conviction in 1992 for 7 cases of unaliving people and 2 attempts of the same offense. After serving 12 years of a 20-year sentence, Van Schoor was released on parole in 2004. There was little public outcry from the communities most impacted by his crimes, which made his re-entry into society a quiet affair. This subdued response may reflect the complexities of a nation wrestling with its past and striving for reconciliation. Post-release, Van Schoor's attempts to reintegrate were fraught with the weight of his past. In interactions with the media, he presented a narrative of a man caught in the crosshairs of a violent era, claiming he was performing his duty during the apartheid regime and asserting a lack of recollection of the specific details of his crimes. His public apologies for the pain and suffering caused were an attempt to atone, yet they were met with skepticism. Van Schoor's plan to write a book to set the record straight about his life and actions is indicative of his desire to control his narrative. He wished to portray himself as a crime fighter rather than a person who causes people to pass away, a stance that clashed with the public's perception of his actions as emblematic of the era's racial violence and injustice. Adding a personal dimension to his complex story is the case of his daughter, Sabrina. Serving a 25-year sentence for orchestrating the passing away of her mother, Sabrina's actions added another layer of tragedy to the Van Schoor family narrative. In the wake of his release, Van Schoor expressed a willingness to connect with his mixed-race grandchild, who was in state custody at the time. This aspect of his life highlights the personal consequences of his actions and the intergenerational impact of violence. Van Schoor's life post-release remained largely out of the public eye, with little information about his day-to-day life, adding to the enigma surrounding his persona. Between the years 1983 and 1989, the Lainz General Hospital in Vienna, Austria, became the unlikely setting for a series of crimes so macabre that they shook the nation to its core. 4 nurses, Maria Gruber, Irene Lydolf, Stefanija Meyer, and Waltraud Wagner, collectively known as the Lainz Angels of Death, orchestrated a spree of unaliving people that would forever mar the reputation of one of the city's most trusted institutions. Trusted as caregivers, these nurses abused their positions in the most horrific way possible. Their method of unaliving people was as cold-blooded as it was shocking, administering lethal overdoses of morphine and, in some cases, forcibly drowning patients by pouring water into their lungs. The very hands that were supposed to heal and care for vulnerable elderly patients became instruments of death. The motives behind these heinous acts were as varied as they were disturbing. Some of these incidents were reportedly committed out of a misguided sense of mercy to relieve the patients of their perceived suffering. Others had darker motivations, such as a desire for power or even boredom. The sheer number of victims, estimated to be as many as 49, underscored the gravity and scale of their crimes. The unraveling of this dark saga began with a seemingly innocuous incident. In February 1989, a doctor overheard the nurses joking about one of their recent cases of unaliving someone in a bar. This conversation, once reported to the authorities, led to the unveiling of the gruesome reality. Upon their arrest, the 4 nurses confessed to their crimes, sending shockwaves across Austria and beyond. In 1991, Wagner and Lydolf, the most prominent figures in the group, were brought to trial. The proceedings revealed the horrifying extent of their actions and resulted in convictions for both, with sentences of life imprisonment. However, the story took an unexpected turn when both were released early in 2008 due to good behavior. This decision sparked widespread public outrage, with many feeling that justice had not been adequately served given the severity of their offenses. The other 2 members, Gruber and Meyer, convicted on lesser charges, had already been released earlier. The provision of new identities facilitated their reintegration into society and served as a safeguard against potential reprisals. This level of anonymity has kept their post-release lives largely out of the public eye, with little to no information available about their current whereabouts or activities. The release of these nurses and the protective measures taken in their favor continue to be a point of contention and debate. For many, the thought of these individuals, once capable of such cruelty, living freely and anonymously is a source of unease and frustration. The lack of closure and the scant details available about their current lives only add to the public's discomfort. Charlene Galo and her partner Gerald Gallego, between 1978 and 1980, carved a path of terror across Sacramento, California, embarking on a rampage that claimed the lives of numerous young women. Their crime spree stands out not just for its brutality, but also for the psychological manipulation and control at its core, revealing a disturbing facet of human behavior. Charlene, who had been married and divorced twice before meeting Gerald, found a dark connection with him. They shared a deviant desire that soon spiraled into a series of crimes. Their modus operandi was chillingly methodical. The couple would scout shopping malls, preying on vulnerable teenagers. These unsuspecting victims were lured with false promises, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The Gallegos' van became a mobile chamber of horrors where these young women were restrained in chains, harmed, and eventually unalived. Their reign of terror continued for 2 harrowing years until the law finally caught up with them. Charlene, positioning herself as a victim of Gerald's manipulation, managed to strike a plea deal. In 1980, she pleaded guilty to the offense and received a sentence of 16 years and 8 months, a term that many felt was grossly inadequate given the severity of her crimes. Gerald, identified as the mastermind, received no such leniency and was condemned to death row, where he eventually died of cancer. July 1997 marked a significant turn in Charlene's story, her release from prison. Having served her sentence, she stepped back into a world vastly different from the one she had left. She moved to Fair Oaks, Sacramento, deliberately choosing the familiar territory as her new abode. Assuming the identity of Mary Martinez, she embarked on a life starkly contrasting her past. This new chapter was devoid of public attention, allowing her to blend into the fabric of everyday life. Her heinous acts were a closed chapter in her personal history. The decision to return to Sacramento, the very place that bore witness to her crimes, was a bold one. Here, in the blazing California sun, Charlene, now Mary, made an effort to establish a brand new life that would be anonymous and normal. The community, largely unaware of her true identity, offered her a chance at a fresh start, a luxury rarely afforded to those with such a notorious past. Charlene's post-release life has been shrouded in normalcy and devoid of further legal troubles. This absence of subsequent criminal activity suggests that her time in prison might have been a period of transformation. Whether this change was genuine or a mere adaptation to societal expectations remains a subject of speculation. Her ability to live a life free from further legal entanglements raises questions about the nature of rehabilitation and the possibility of redemption for individuals who have committed grave offenses. The narrative of Charlene Galo is complex and multifaceted. It delves into the depths of human depravity and the capacity for manipulation within intimate relationships. It is a story that speaks to the darker aspects of human nature, the psychological mechanisms that drive individuals to commit heinous acts, and the societal response to such transgressions. Her transformation from a convicted bad person to an unassuming member of society under a new identity is a tale that continues to provoke discussion. It challenges our notions of justice and the rehabilitation process, highlighting the delicate balance between punishment and the opportunity for a second chance. As she lives out her days in the quiet suburbs of Fair Oaks, the legacy of her actions lingers, a silent echo of a past that once sent shockwaves through the heart of Sacramento. Her story, though faded from the headlines, remains etched in the memories of those who recall the terror she and Gerald brought to their victims and the community. Arve Finness's case stands as one of the most disturbing instances of criminal activity within the healthcare system in Norwegian history. His transformation from a trusted nurse and nursing home manager to a convicted serial killer is a narrative that still sends shivers down the spine of the Norwegian public. Nesset's story begins in the quiet confines of a nursing home in Orkdal, where he was entrusted with the care of the elderly. This trust was grotesquely violated between the late 1970s and early 1980s, when Nesset embarked on a spree of sending people out of this world that would make him one of Norway's most infamous criminals. The method of his madness was the administration of lethal doses of Curacet, a muscle-relaxing drug, to unsuspecting patients under his care. In 1983, the facade of the caring nurse crumbled when Nesset was convicted for the poisoning of 22 patients, although he had initially confessed to unaliving 27. The discrepancy between his confession and the number of convictions only added to the mystique and horror surrounding his crimes. His actions not only ended the lives of numerous individuals, but also breached the sacred trust placed in healthcare providers. The trial of Arve Finness was a matter of national attention, raising significant concerns and debates about his mental state. Psychiatrists who examined him declared him sane and fit for trial, a decision that was met with varying degrees of acceptance and skepticism. His various confessions and retractions throughout the investigation and trial painted a picture of a deeply complex and troubled individual. Sentenced to 21 years in prison, the maximum term available under Norwegian law at that time, Nesset served 12 years before being released in 2004. His early release was a decision that stirred controversy and raised questions about the justice system's handling of cases involving serious mental health issues. Since his release, Nesset is believed to be living under an assumed name in an undisclosed location. This anonymity has shrouded the latter part of his life in mystery. Details about whether he started a family or any aspects of his post-release life are scarce, leaving the public with more questions than answers. Nesset's case is notable not only for the number of potential victims, but also for the nature of the crimes. The use of Curacet to poison patients in a nursing home setting is a chilling reminder of the vulnerability of the elderly and the trust we place in those who care for them. It also highlights the challenges of detecting and preventing such crimes within healthcare institutions. The legacy of Arve Finness is a complex one. On one hand, he is a convicted bad person who violated the sanctity of his profession. On the other, he is a figure who challenges our understanding of mental health in the context of criminal behavior. Pedro Alonso Lopez, infamously known as the Monster of the Andes, is a figure whose very name conjures images of unparalleled criminal horror in Latin America. His life story is a grim journey through the depths of human depravity, encompassing a series of crimes so vast and brutal that they defy comprehension. Born in 1948 in Colombia, Lopez's early life was marked by hardship and abuse, factors that would later be cited in attempts to understand his descent into serial unaliving. Beginning his criminal career in the late 1960s, Lopez's name would soon become synonymous with terror across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. His primary targets were young women and girls, vulnerable members of society whom he preyed upon with ruthless efficiency. Between 1969 and 1980, Lopez's reign of terror reached its peak. He was convicted of causing the death of at least 110 people during this period, though he chillingly claimed the actual number was more than 300. The scale of his crimes is almost unfathomable, painting a picture of a man whose capacity for violence knew no bounds. In 1980, Lopez was finally apprehended and brought to justice in Ecuador. Given the enormity of his crimes, his sentence of 16 years, the maximum sentence in Ecuador at the time, struck many as grossly inadequate. This sentiment was further compounded when Lopez was released early in 1994 for good behavior, a decision that sparked outrage and disbelief, both within Ecuador and internationally. Upon his deportation to Colombia, Lopez's legal odyssey took another turn. Initially detained as an illegal immigrant, he was subsequently declared insane and committed to a mental hospital. His stay in the hospital, however, was short-lived. In 1998, Lopez was released on a mere $70 bail under the condition that he report regularly to authorities. Astonishingly, and to the horror of many, he vanished almost immediately after his release, effectively becoming a ghost. The last confirmed sighting of Lopez was in September 1999. Since then, his whereabouts have been shrouded in mystery. Rumors and unconfirmed sightings have placed him in various locations, but no substantial evidence has emerged to pinpoint his exact location. The lack of concrete information about his current status has left a void filled with speculation, fear, and unresolved grief for the families of his countless victims. Lopez's absence from the public eye since his disappearance has only added to his notoriety. The fact that he could be anywhere, or perhaps nowhere, has instilled a sense of unease that lingers to this day. His story is a dark reminder of the capacity for evil that exists and the imperative need for vigilance and justice in the face of such atrocities. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.